Well, it all kicked off in the summer of '67, which was the first British summer of love, and very, very similar to the American Golden Gate Park event happening. New words were coming into being, like happening, drop out, turn on, um, uh, and it just grabbed it. The people I knew immediately took to it, especially uh, especially in certain little parts of London where there was a burgeoning underground, and there was this club called UFO, opened by this guy called Hoppy, who managed the Pink Floyd, and they were a psychedelic band, and that was a whole new. That word psychedelic just was like a magnet, it magnetized you to want to go and find LSD. Anyway, we found the acid, and it was quite wonderful, and that lasted a whole summer until. But even, and it was so short lived, this is what's phenomenal, yet its impact was tremendous. Gave us a whole, it started this epic journey to the east where many people were going off to quote unquote find themselves and search for meaning in their life. And then bringing back these ideas. And of course, with that came all the gurus, and so it was a very, very exciting time. But by the end of it, it had become a drug fest. People became overindulgent, and there was many disasters. The first one being America, where you had Charles Manson, and that was like the other side of the age of Aquarius. It was a dark. People were doing downers, mixing downers, heroin, acid. Then the carpetbaggers moved in and co-opted the style, and it became fashionable and trendy. And by then my friends and I, we had taken off on our travels. We were traveling in different countries for quite a long period. Reading books like Castaneda and Gurdjieff and Be Here Now. But when we returned in the 80s, there was not a trace of anything left. It was all Maggie Thatcher, and there was no. I couldn't see any of hippie thing at all. It was, until the rave thing, and this was the connection, and that happened through the Scoobies, through Martin and Mark, who came to us because of this magazine, Encyclopedia Psychedelica, which was kind of history of the 60s and all the good things that had happened there. And anyway, they loved it, and they took us to a rave, and that just blew me away. It was young people hugging each other, and it was breaking non-sexually. It was non-gender based, and that was another beautiful thing. And again, it was a drug that was a catalyst. It was ecstasy. And from then on in, we developed. This began to. You could see it was going to get bigger. The rave thing was going to be even bigger than the '60s explosion. And it was just tremendously exciting. It was a whole new music, a whole new concept, and the concept this time was not to drop out, but to sort of drop in, to merge technology with consciousness. So you had DJs, light shows, and virtual reality, and this was what was happening, and this continued for quite a long. This continued for a long time. Timothy Leary was the major influence, and then I think because of his the three little words he used: tune in, turn on, and drop out, and we all took to that like water. That seemed. He was a Harvard professor who had taken LSD and psilocybin mushrooms, went on this astonishing trip, but he could articulate it. He was a scientist, and he brought this science and spirituality together like nobody else did. And he was just such a figurehead for for that whole movement. It's a shame they hounded him. They really hounded him badly for that, and people were scared of drugs, especially acid, and they outlawed him, banned him. He ended up in jail. But he died a fairly wise old guy, which was quite nice, really. Playboy magazine published this interview with him where he talks about LSD and acid. We'd never heard about it before, and being the greatest aphrodisiac in the world was how he described it. How you're just beyond, it's beyond sex or anything like that. So that immediately, any young enthusiastic person reading, man or woman reading that, wanted to get a hold of it. And the world then was kind of divided between straight, super straight, and your kind of outsider, vaguely left existentialist. And you had the Beats, of course, who were kind of predating the hippies in some ways, with Allen Ginsberg and Burroughs, and living a kind of free lifestyle. But when acid and lyric came along, that just gave it a deeper definition. We knew what we were. With the Beats and the others, it was against conformity, against the greyness. With acid, it was force. It was much more positive. You were for change. You were for seeing a human being as this one glowing god, if you like, or goddess. So, and it just had a powerful effect on me and many of my friends, especially my friend Fraser. And we did it together, travelled together. And Fraser and I met one Saturday afternoon on the Portobello Road, and introduced by this mutual Glaswegian friend. And we hit it off right away. Went back to, I had a little house in Notting Hill then. So we went back and smoked a joint. And that was it. From that day on, we used to meet regularly. He was a little bit ahead. He was a little bit older than me and a bit more. He had taken LSD as a psychologist and written about it in this great, still unpublished book of his called Shazam. And we were all impressed by this. This guy had already written a book about acid and the spiritual journey. Then we travelled, then separated. Then we met again in the 80s, where we realised there was not a trace of, as I was saying earlier, not a trace of the hippie thing. So we started this Encyclopedia Psychedelica. And it took off as a British underground countercultural magazine. And from there, one thing, we weren't doing any parties, or there was no rave scene then. But then in the 90s, we were doing this magazine. We were approached by two young guys, Martin and Mark, who had read the Encyclopedia Psychedelica and liked what we were saying. And we had never heard of rave culture, until these two showed up. And they took us along to a rave. And I can't remember, I think it was Heaven with Danny Rampling, DJ then, very famous DJ now. And it just knocked us out. And from then on, we started promoting rave culture and this new wave of youth culture. And I think Fraser was really the dominant figure in promoting this. But together we started a club called Megatripolis, and Megatripolis became very famous in the London underground scene, promoting dance music and other. And bringing people like Leary, like Baba Ram Dass, like Terence McKenna, we brought them over here to give talks at Megatripolis and other places. When we first put the Encyclopedia Psychedelica together, we were using, Ronio. This was hand-rolled, a hand-rolling technique where you rolled, you had to use ink in the cartridges and letraset, which you glued onto the paper. Then the first computers came along, and that made, with editing facilities, and that was wonderful. That changed the whole ball game. I think we did the third magazine on computer. We did the first two just by hand and collating them, stapling them, the whole. But it was something we lovingly did. We were in a learning curve with this. And the fact that the magazine took off gave us all that enthusiasm, and we're getting a lot of attention. Good attention, bad attention. Drug culture is back again.
How did that attention come about? Can you tell us, like, how did people
we got reviews in the Standard, the Guardian, the Times. The Standard was very good, saying this is a poetic magazine, and they took examples of this as that, and it's nice to see this ethos back again about embracing people and loving them. But the Times and the Guardian were quite scathing. They were saying drug culture is back. Lock up your daughters. All the usual hype. There was an underbelly always to the drug scene, and that's always been there, no matter what. That's people who had fallen through the net into kind of heroin addiction and serious morphine, speed addictions. They gave the good drugs a bad name, because not every drug user was using it in excess. Many people did. And we weren't just promoting drugs, but we were promoting lifestyle, which was important, i.e. travel, consciousness, getting involved with perhaps a countercultural group or something. But the spin-offs from the 60s were interesting, because that started off your let's see, counterculture groups like Rebirthing, EST, which was a slightly corporate, but nevertheless they were taking these ideas into mainstream culture, and that was lovely to see, these ideas that we had kind of battled for, if you like, going into mainstream culture. We printed, their first run was 500, and we hand delivered them to every alternative bookstore in London that we could find. The best was Lee Harris in Portobello Road. He had this place, an old head shop. He sold lots of copies. Mysteries in Covent Garden, that was another one. They're still going. And Compendium, which was in Camden Town, that was like an underground bookstore. You go in there and you get all types of band books and books on every possible related countercultural subject. They took lots of copies. So but it was hand delivered. And we thought it would be a quarterly. We'd do every 4 months. That was just too much work. It soon became twice. I think we did 17 editions of the encyclopedia, and at the end we just had so many helpers, people coming, and it took off. I mean, we didn't have to search anymore. People came and helped, and we began to get Marcus Pennell came in. He was a computer whiz kid, so that upped the production of it. So we began to produce more. With Evolution, which I can't find a copy. I have a copy here somewhere, but I can't find it. But I think Kate has a copy that you can show. With Evolution, we had the full window display in Virgin in Oxford Street up. They put 50 copies in the window, and that was marvellous to see. Fraser and I had talked a lot about philosophy when we were first taking LSD, and LSD gave us a view of the world. Also, gave us a purpose. We realised that it's okay to feel enlightened, but you have to do something with it if you want to change. So we began to examine ways of how people change and how to change, and we went really into this quite deeply. And it became that became our grounding really, as how do you get people to develop and change. And what we did, we just took from what was there in the present, which was a hell of a lot. I.e., we were learning from people like Leary and Baba Ramdas and other spiritual figures, and we realised that it's a spiritual path really that ultimately is your human destiny. So we moved from that and used the tools of the present, which was the music, the dancing, getting to youth. That was the best way to get to youth culture. It was to use the things that they were already interested in, and add consciousness to that. That was the, and that seemed to work for a while. And I think it's a good blueprint to see what's happening, see what comes up from youth culture, and then infuse it with these ideas, which are really eternal ideas. They're not ideas that are just one-offs. They've been there for millennium, going back to Buddha, Jesus, Zoroaster, whoever you want to name. But they're all showed that your life had meaning, your life meant something, and you're not just an isolated nothing in this world. But we had really, Fraser and I, we had travelled, gone to monasteries, did meditation, practiced yoga. So we were trying to come from an authentic place, not just, and trying to live the things that we spoke about. So it wasn't words, it was our actions were hopefully behind it, and sincere actions. And that gave us some integrity, I think, because there was nothing else remotely interesting going on as far as we were concerned. This had to be the most vital thing going on. Your whole life. When we started Evolution, that was something. The people that we drew in, like yourself, others, it was, we couldn't believe it. We'd go home at night just happily, blissful. To be, because we were older, from an older time, and the welcome that we got from the rave generation that were embracing these ideas, that made us feel top of the world. That was it, because they were finding a home again. These ideas were finding a good home again. I think I was about 34, 35, still just coming up to middle age, and the early parts of youth were flittering away. We were older, slightly wiser, maybe. Maybe. Shamani came out of the experience with Terence McKenna, who, as I said, the pioneer of ayahuasca, and he had gone to the Amazon jungle and taken yahe. It was called yahe then. Yahe, Spanish word for ayahuasca. And he was with shaman in the jungle when he took it, and he wrote about this. And when we discovered this, and his promotion of shamanism, even though it was little known then, it simply just took off with McKenna. Shamanism became the new guru, if you like. The shaman were we had the band The Shamen even round here, kind of taking ayahuasca with McKenna here, and it's still now the most. Shamanism is now I would say the kind of number one interest of people looking at themselves. They're in some ways, shamanism predates religion, was the origins of religion. I think our religions came out of early shamans, and so that was a positive discovery. Shamanarchy came out from, and it was actually Jamie Reid. Jamie Reid was, he did the cover of the Sex Pistols' first album, and he invented needles and pins and all that. And Jamie contacted us and he said we could. When we were doing the album, he helped with the album Shamanic in the UK, and he came up with a title name like that because there was Anarchy in the UK, which was the punk thing, and so we put shaman and anarchy together. And came up with Shamanarchy, which was wonderful. It was just great, and it was a kind of ambient house thing. The album, they were never great big mainstream sellers, but they had countercultural kudos, which was what we wanted anyway. We were interested in the corporate or the bread or never for the money. We were hand in mouth. We put in our own pockets. We were hawking stuff. We were asking people for contributions. We were harassing everybody for money. I mean, we'd try to get venues, printers, publishers, all to do it for free, and we scammed like anything to get that. But that was part of the fun as well, to get that. And it wasn't our interest. We wanted to make a profit. We had this saying, what was peace, love, and a fair profit. The fair profit was you put your work in, you're entitled to get something. But that something was meant to do good with, not for your own special. Take care of your everyday things. That was necessary. You had to do that to take care of your life, just so you could go on. Not as in profiting from bread or money, but profit as in prophetic, as in prophesizing something good for human beings. That was our ethos, really. No. It sounds terribly altruistic and idealistic, but we felt like that. We were, even if we were deluded, we were sincerely deluded. No, it wasn't for fame or fortune or any of those things. It was to get an important cultural, spiritual message across. When KLF came along, that blew us away. That they were interested in that. They did a good few gigs, and Spiral Tribe, who were really out on the edge. They were total free festivals, and I mean, KLF burnt £1 million. They burnt to show that money was meaningless. Well, I remember when we went to visit KLF and we found our magazines in their flat, and we were gobsmacked. You know. So what? This was. We thought we're reaching into the heart of youth culture now, and they just loved our ideas. And as you say, they took Fraser to. I didn't go. I can't remember what happened. But that gave us kudos, having those guys. And the same with Spiral Tribe. When we visited them, they had all our magazines. It was just, we realised now that we were really influencing people. That was a powerful aphrodisiac, if you like. My memory is slightly foggy as to exact times and dates, but that was heady times. Spiral Tribe and KLF came around about the same time. But McKenna was the cream who came in. He was really the one who started the shaman thing. He should be credited for that. There's now quite a few people who come along who's kind of living off his and he never gets a mention. Something should be done about that. I mean, it's and he was mind blowing in his descriptions of ayahuasca, and that was the important shamanic influence. And from him it took off. The whole thing spread. We realised, I think, quite round about the time of evolution, that we had something special, that we were doing something that would have reverberations in history, and this was an additional motivating factor, if you like, And Fraser was very good at spotting trends. That was his great. He could spot a trend coming a mile away, and that was his great vision, if you like. And he knew right from the start that rave culture in particular was going to be something else. And way before anybody, he was up on just the importance of that. So, I think that was mainly because of the experiences of the 60s, seeing something being part of something that had begun and ended, and there were similarities between the rave culture in the 60s, i.e. not just the catalyst being a drug, but dancing in youth, loving each other. That was a great similarity. So that gave us a kind of edge to see that history was we could see history forming before our eyes. I do think he is unwritten in that sense. You're right. A hell of a lot more should be, and it will be. I've tried to cover that in The Golden Monkey. We give a history of how exactly Fraser and myself and a few others developed these ideas. But I think he's a seminal figure in rave culture, particularly, especially with Megatripolis. That was it still has reverberation. This Megatripolis site there, that still has people going along to the site. Megatripolis came out. I remember we were sitting talking one night, and we were thinking of Glastonbury and the hippie festivals, and we thought, why not bring a festy atmosphere into rave culture? So Megatripolis, you could go there and be part of a festival. You can get a massage, bric-a-brac, and then you could go to the dance floor. And the idea was a festy rave. It was a festival that gave it a uniqueness, because you had these hippie ideas mixing with rave culture, and it seemed a perfect blend. But the Megatripolis itself came from a short story that Fraser wrote in the 60s about a place that everybody wants to find, but nobody knows where it is. So it's a young guy who's on a search for Megatripolis. Anyway, had drug references.
The future perfect state.
The future perfect state, absolutely. It was a lovely little phrase. And that was the last thing he wrote, something called the future perfect state. I have a few CDs of that. I'm waiting for somebody to come along and do something with it. I don't have time, but if you were ever... Megatripolis was the future perfect state. But again, it was the idea of a joyful festival in a rave scene. That mix of two countercultures, the best of them both, really. So, and it worked. It was on a Thursday night at Heaven, and DJ, we had guest DJs, Danny Rampling, Sequenzi, Marco Arnaldi, God, who else? I'm trying to remember now. I forget half of them. But it was every Thursday, and we had that for quite a few years. And we had computer graphics. I think 2,000-3,000 we would have turn up. It was packed. I mean, people were queuing around all day, all night, and that was to see that was just a sight, to see crowds of people queuing up for you. Just so good.
And what years are we talking?
I think from 95 to about 2000. I think no. When? When?
Really?
No.
Before.
Wait a minute. Sorry. 93, 94. The year or two before, maybe. I'll have to check that. I'll have to check. Let's see. I think you might be right. Maybe. Right. But it lasted a good few years, which was that was that was a good long run. And then, of course, it too dispersed into people having different positions, DJs becoming too ego. When it first began, it was an egoless thing. DJs and audience mixed, and there was it was all embracing. But then ego began to manifest itself a few years later, and like everything else, it broke up naturally. And these things naturally come to an end.
Fraser was quite a challenging person to.
Sorry?
Fraser was a challenging person to work with.
Oh Jesus, I don't know how many times we fell out 100 times, and sort of lost a lot of people, made friends and enemies. Yeah, Scooby will tell you that he was demanding to work with. Those two were great, Mark, the Scoobies. They were really instrumental in bringing us all in. They should be mentioned. The Scooby Doobies, they were two young ravers, now in Yorkshire, but they had this whole company of people behind them that were into fashion, music, and Sarah and Brighton, I think. And they filled us full of enthusiasm for rave culture. And Martin was really the brains behind it. He knew the direction. He was a real visionary, Martin. He had cosmic links, that boy. And influenced Fraser a great deal. Even so, Fraser would take from Martin's ideas, and
it was probably him that gave me my name. Now I think about it.
Oh yeah, Martin.
Magic Polly.
That's right. He's doing great things now. He's still, but like at the end of it, he was very disillusioned. He fell out with Fraser. There was lots of conflict, which maybe is inevitable in some ways if it's too idealistic and you're tucking negatives under your belly, they're bound to resurface at some point. So at its peak, we were dancing on the dance floor, and that was it was the fact that people were dancing was such a joyful, affirmative. You go home and blissful and exhausted after an evening out, and people were. It seemed like we were one family, one big happy family almost. Not to sound like a cliche, but it really did feel like that. The ecstasy, and I'm not talking about the drug. It was so buoyant and positive that you'd wake up the next morning again just full of enthusiasm to plan the next rave or the next event. And people were, and these were fresh ideas, so it was thrilling and exciting and the freshness of it was something else. That was. We thought we were going to change the world, and of course, incrementally, yes, maybe, but I, ironically, myself more than Fraser, who was a sort of blindside that he thought it would go on forever, and that was a defect, because you could see some things were coming. For example, there was a lot of dealers were moving into the scene, and other nefarious types were coming in, and you could see the DJs were beginning again to develop egos, and it was becoming factions. So that, and I could spot that for me. This is the beginning of I became quite not disillusioned, but saddened by that. Then there was big breakups that happened between Martin and Fraser, and there's some other people I can't can't remember this one guy in particular Bugsy, who stole a lot of money that we had in the tills at Megatripolis, and he tried to take a corporate takeover of Megatripolis. And Fraser had made the mistake of befriending him and bringing him in to the detriment of people like Martin and Mark, who had been far more idealistic and they weren't interested in the bread, they were interested in the ethos and the ideas. But when the corporate fields started to creep in, that was the end, really. It was the beginning of the end. Yeah, even though I say that, at the same time, in Goa, they were picking up on trance, and so it was spread. The youth culture thing was spreading. And London was the base. England, I think, has some of the best youth culture in the world, without a doubt. I mean, punks, Teddy Boys, the Beatles, rave culture. There's something about this island that produces a good broth of youth culture, and it was really spreading. You could see the Australia, India, New Zealand, Europe. It was going on, and that was, even though the centre had shifted from London, although it began here and Manchester to some degree. And it's still going on.
So what did you do when Megatripolis came to an end? How did you carry on your life? Was it an abrupt shift?
It was a gradual. I got involved with events. I got involved with War Child. Started promoting, doing other types of events. Did a 4-day event at London Zoo, which was my highlight. That was brilliant. 150 different acts. Worked with the Dalai Lama, raised money for Tibet, and we continued. Fraser and I continued to be friends, but I wasn't so involved then anymore. And I also wanted to write. I was continue to try and write these books I'd been writing. Then, as I said, it sort of dispersed. Fraser went on to, I think, promote the Up, which was an online, because by then computers had, then the internet had come along, so it was this was a whole new medium for getting so we moved more or less to the internet after. Oh yes, Tonka were amazing. I loved Tonka were great. Those were good days with Tonka. And Felix, remember Felix? He was there too. That was his first time. This was the idea of the Festi Rave thing. This was the festival and the rave. I mean, we took all those guys to Glastonbury and there were kids amongst them who had never been out of inner cities, who were just blown away by. And that was a beautiful thing to see. Kids that hadn't been out of London going there and seeing green fields and. Yeah, there was a big run-in. There was a big run-in with the police and the travellers. One night in particular, where the travels were wide. They also had these crusties amongst the travellers, and the crusties were exactly as they sound. They were like derelict types, and a few of them had AIDS. In this one particular confrontation between this line of police, a couple of crusties got up, and one particular says, "Come near me, I'll cut myself, I'll get AIDS, and I'll splash my blood all over you." And this was just not Glastonbury anymore, and shame. But there was always although the travellers had a genuine Romany feeling, there was an element that was violent, which was not what we were about at all. Violence was just no. We rented this cottage in the countryside where we did Evolution magazine. But the couple that we rented to, we discovered, were manufacturing acid and ecstasy. So the police raided it and took in Fraser and myself. They let us out the same day, but it was a heavy grilling. But it turned out that they both got 12 years in jail. And that was like the underbelly of the drug scene. Shame. The two people that we rented the house to, they would help us with money and stuff, but we didn't know where. We assumed they were living high. They were wealthy Americans, but they were mass producing LSD and acids. And ecstasy. So, with drugs, I would say ritual, not habitual. Anything that's habitual is dangerous because you build up a dependency, and that has long-term bad effects. Ritual, not habitual. Don't overdo it. Try everything once. I think that's fair enough to. Don't leave any stone unturned, but don't abuse yourself. That's dangerous. And actually, that phrase comes from Martin. Ritual, not habitual, and I think that's a good measure. If you're going to do a serious psychedelic, do it ritualistically, and don't do it 50 times. Once is usually okay. Maybe a few more times after. No, not at all. Not at all. I'll speak to you off the record. No, off the record. It's ironic because now everybody almost does, changing the world. Everybody does yoga now. It's almost like designer yoga with my colonic irrigation. And even though I'm critical of it in the sense that a lot of it's done for being fashionable and trendy, there's a spiritual element in that. So that was a success. That's definitely a success of both the 60s and the 90s. The ideas of vegetarianism, vegan, that's also something that we promoted. The groups, the consciousness groups that abound now. There's thousands of so that's another successful offshoot of that have gone into the mainstream. And I mean, today's rebellion becomes tomorrow's kind of not tomorrow's mainstream, if you like. But I'm especially pleased about yoga and these ideas being embedded in modern being embedded. And they're now teaching meditation in schools. That's another thing, which is wonderful. I think today, now looking at things today, that's a yes. Peace and harmony is a long way off, and indeed it's almost as if it's opposite and counterpole, where you have a great dumbing down. I don't think there's been such a dumbed down generation. Celebrity culture being absurd. People following idiots here and in America. It's hard to find any signs of positive change. So I think something is due to happen again. It has to be. Usually the 20, 30 year cycles when something new comes up. And I think it's time for some kind of fresh thing to make people aware again that it's people that are important. I mean, it's really difficult to see the future at this point, where you have mass conformity like never. People are so similar now. It's not to get to despairing it about it, but I think we live in dangerous times now, where post-truth, post-truth, fake news, and I mean, I really don't know. I go back to this word dumbing down. There's been a great dumbing down, and I don't want to end in a sour note. There are good things going on in small areas of small groups of people, trying to keep ideas burning and alive. I know a few good groups that are around, kind of working away at that. But for the general mainstream, I think that's somehow almost crystallized into this, I don't know, blancmange of celebrity culture, which is loathsome, I think.